In today's episode, we're joined by Martin McAndrew. Martin is a seasoned business leader, marketing agency owner, and coach with a rich background in engineering, technical consultancy, and entrepreneurship. With over 2 decades of experience in the industry, Martin has successfully transitioned from his engineering roots to become an influential figure in business growth and transformation. He combines his technical acumen with a deep understanding of human behavior to offer unique insights into marketing and business challenges. Join us today as we dive into the world of SEO, specifically as it relates to improving e-commerce websites and their organic presence online. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the Digital Revolution podcast. I'm your host, Eli Adams. Today's episode is brought to you by fireusmarketing.com, where SEO solutions pave the way to digital excellence. Welcome to the show, Martin.
Oh, thank you very much for having me.
I'm really excited to have you on. Like I was saying offline, I've been following you on LinkedIn for quite some time, and as most of the people we have in this SEO podcast, you're so generous with the amount of knowledge that you give out for free that I admire it so much. So I appreciate you adding value on that platform and lots of other platforms I'm sure that you're on, but I'm excited to have you on the show today.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm really happy to be here. Thank you.
Okay, so let's dive in. Let's get to know a little bit about Martin. So where'd you grow up? What'd you want to be when you were little? How'd you go from there to getting into the digital world?
Yeah, so I grew up in Milton Keynes, which is just north of London in the UK. I went to Southampton's University, where I was originally going to study aerospace engineering, ended up getting into marine engineering. That was a BEng, so that was a 4-year course. I then went into yacht broking, of all things, so kind of selling motor yachts. A lot of work was kind of outside, and winter was coming, and it does get a little bit cold sometimes here in the UK, and how can I get into the office for the winter season? So they were wanting a new website built and a database built, and yeah, I thought I'd be able to do that. So I managed to convince my boss to give me a go, and that got me in the warm over the winter, and that's where it all started from.
Was that your first introduction to marketing, or was it like beforehand?
Yeah, so I'd done a little bit of kind of HTML and little bits and bobs, but yeah, it was mostly the motivation for it not to be freezing cold outside is what got me into it.
Okay. So then so your boss gives you this job, you sit down in front of the computer and you just Google, hey, how do I do this? And you just kind of figured it out?
Yeah, kind of. So it was back when technology was a little bit more in its infancy. So the model they basically had was you would be looking to buy maybe an 80, 90 foot motor yacht. You would probably need an 80 to 90 foot mooring to stick it on. You would probably want a house nearby, because that's what these guys tend to have.
Yeah.
So we built a system where anything that anyone owns is always kind of a sale if the price was right. So there might be someone's looking for a 90-foot Reaver, for example, but there's none on the market. But there's 3 or 4 guys who have been looking at 90-foot Pershings, and they might consider moving on if you could put the right deal together. So that was kind of in the early days of building this kind of multi-product database and CRM before CRMs were really a thing. We did a lot of work over in Italy, and it was even down to where we wanted to rank locally in Italy. So the website had to be put on an Italian server. It was back in those days. So you used to get flights over to Genova in Italy to meet with the technical guys and get things set up. So yeah, it had its benefits.
So how did you go from selling yachts and building that website to owning an agency?
Yeah, so started off, so I worked for the yacht brokerage for about a year and a half, got fairly au fait with development, SEO, and kind of beginnings of PPC there back in the day, and email marketing and the basics. I then went and worked for a large telecoms company in the UK, kind of a B2B telecoms company, quite well known at the time, did about a year and a half there. And then formed the search department in the biggest agency on the south coast of the UK, worked with some massive clients, some big government clients, and kind of quite big commerce clients. And one day thought, I think I can do this, and handed my notice in to my boss. It all got very, very real. Started off in the evenings when I was kind of working out my notice, got a first couple of clients, and never really looked back, and just kind of worked at it every day since, pretty much.
So I know a lot of people in the marketing world. There's like 2 types. There's the type who just sit in the basement, they're quiet, they do their work, they're really good at it. And then there's the type that's a little bit more vocal, that's on social, they go to events and stuff. Was there something in your life, maybe even in childhood, that made you so outgoing that you wanted to get on a platform like LinkedIn, and you're so good at like sharing that knowledge every single day. Was there something early on that made you go that way instead of the other way?
Um, Probably is that actually as a person, I probably am the other way. I'm not actually that much of an extrovert. I think I use LinkedIn as, it's not as a way to generate business, but it's as a way to get people aware of you.
Yeah.
So if it was a funnel, it's very top of funnel. In terms of being maybe on the introverted side slightly, it's a relatively easy way to broadcast yourself without having to be extroverted, because you can produce things in the comfort of your own home. Things like networking and going out and meeting people is still something that's a challenge for me. I was always a technical person, and kind of I got quite a robust understanding by being the technical person. And I've had to become the more extrovert person. And I've had to become, the person that can talk to board level people, who can do sales, who, that isn't naturally where I come from. That's something that I've had to work pretty hard at to improve upon.
And that's important. Owning an agency, you got to be able to do that, right?
Yeah, it would be lovely just to sit in the corner and code things and do cool stuff. But yeah, unfortunately, it's the soft skills that are very, very important when you get to doing those sorts of activities.
What are you currently working on that excites you? So you wake up in the morning, you're like, man, I can't wait to go and do this. What's that for you right now?
I'm quite enjoying the new challenge of AI and kind of integrating it into tasks. There seems to be a lot of people out there developing AI for things that aren't problems. And there's a lot of things that you can do with AI that, okay, you can do them. That doesn't mean you probably should. But, it's a new technology. It's very exciting for doing large batch data processing. We've done it with kind of keyframes of videos versus kind of drop out, and kind of using big batch processing of data to solve questions that are quite tricky. It's still very much in its infancy, but yeah, it almost feels bigger than the internet at the moment. It kind of feels that the functionality is very, very special, and kind of no one really knows how to use it yet. Even the big guys like HubSpot and kind of ClickUp and people like that have integrated it. It's just kind of rewriting stuff you're already writing. It doesn't seem like it's got anywhere near maturity yet, which makes it very, very exciting.
Yeah, it's more machine learning than real AI right now.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Do you have any projects that you've done that you're like, oh my gosh, that saved us lots of hours?
Yeah, a lot of it is not necessarily building new tools with it, but looking at where we spend a lot of our time and working out ways that we can improve what we're producing in that time or make things a lot quicker. So a lot of kind of the reporting data, rather than having execs sitting through and coming up with insights, that'll be plumbed into a tool that extracts insights, and you kind of go through and select the ones that you believe are valuable. Using it to interpret large amounts of video data, for example, so looking at drop-offs in videos, and understanding what is happening in the frames preceding that drop-off. How could we correct that and improve that? We use a lot of video in paid media to identify good audiences. So you could run a whole load of videos to people that are cold, and by looking at how long people interact with the video and kind of where key points are in that video, you can then start to understand which of those are a warm audience and which of them are not such a good audience. And we're using AI data to power those sorts of kind of questions that we're getting answered at the moment.
So it pulls the transcript from the video, it analyzes the transcript and says, here's what bucket you fit in.
Yeah, and you can also kind of pull keyframes out of the video as well, so you can understand. We had it was a video, and it was a guy knocking on a door, and kind of one of the bits that came out of the feedback was, you've introduced a character, but nobody knows who this character is yet. And that was quite an interesting thing that I wouldn't have considered, because I know the guy in the video, I've talked to him every week, so to me I do recognise him. So it almost kind of gave this cold point of view that said, well, I don't know who that is. Why is that person in the video? I'd maybe have lost interest at that stage. So yeah, it's good. It's got to be taken with a bit of a pinch of salt sometimes.
Yeah.
But there's definitely something you can scale what you do by 10 quite easily by focusing on what you do and trying to make those things better. But it's so easy to go, oh, shiny toy, and 4 or 5 hours go past and you've made something cool but has absolutely no value.
Yeah, cool times we live in. I love AI. I think there's some dangers for sure, especially in the digital marketing world. But I think if you use it as a tool to cut down time and add extra value in a shorter amount of time, I think at least until we know exactly what it does and what it can do, that's a safe spot to be.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, so in this SEO series, we've been talking about very specific things. So we've talked about enterprise SEO, SaaS SEO, on-page SEO, off-page SEO, content SEO, and there's a number of different things we've dove into very specifically. And in this episode, we're going to talk about e-commerce SEO. So tell me at a high level, why is it important for an e-commerce company to consider SEO?
Yeah, so I worked for B&Q, which is one of the UK's largest DIY stores over in the UK, and we took them from they redeveloped their whole platform, and it was more of a web build in the end, because actually what they wanted to be able to do is if somebody bought something online, they could take it back to a store and get a refund, or it could be home delivery, and so it became part of this big project, and we were in charge of the SEO perspective of that, so we had to make sure that their digital visibility was maintained and improved over a big, serious, chunky site change. And I've worked with a lot of e-commerce clients since, and it's an interesting place to work because it's very, very competitive, but there are lots of opportunities there, definitely. It's interesting in the way that kind of SEO is going, especially with AI snippets and domination of paid ads. But, some of the things we're going to talk about in the technical parts are how we can kind of think, well, how can we use SEO in maybe slightly different ways? That if a lot of the transactional-based search terms are going to paid search potentially, how can we use SEO to help improve paid search performance, which is one of the things we'll cover later on.
Yeah, for sure. Let's talk from the start. So a lot of companies, when they start SEO, you start with keyword research. How do you do keyword research specifically for an e-commerce company?
Yeah, so there's a couple of different ways. I think we need to look at where in the sales journey are you optimizing. So if you look at kind of closest to the transaction, it's your product pages. And that's, the type of keywords that you're looking for is buy, price, SKU, maybe starting to see reviews of, because people have decided on the product they're looking for, and now they're looking for the person that sells it the cheapest, has the best returns, is the most trusted. That's generally where they are in their buying cycle. If you start moving away from the kind of the transaction and earlier into the funnel, into kind of the research phase, that's when you start maybe going to product category optimization. So rather than having a particular mobile phone, you might be looking at Android phones because they've not decided yet, but it's a category type page. And then if you go a stage above that, you're into informative content, so kind of blog content, that sort of stuff, which might be, what is suitable phones that I can run. I'm type 1 diabetic, so I can run my type 1 diabetic pump on, for example. And that would be a journey of, it needs to be an Android. Okay, which Android do I want? Right, it's a Samsung whatever, and that's the journey that I would follow. So it's understanding that if you go very near the transaction, that's where it's going to be the most competitive, but that's where you're going to see the quickest return on investment. And then the opposite is if you go right at the research stage, it might take longer to see the value from that particular visibility, but because you're putting people higher up in the funnel. So it kind of depends. Ideally, you'd want visibility across the whole funnel. It then becomes looking at competitors and understanding, is there a chance of ranking position 1 for iPhone, whatever? And you've got to kind of be honest with the numbers. Is that possible?
Yeah, I think you hit on a key point, looking at both sides of the funnel, the top and the bottom. And I think both are important for sure. I think that, the majority of people, by the time they hit your website, they know kind of what they're looking for because they've done that research. The question is do you want to be the company that gives them the answers in that research so that you sort of push them to the middle of the funnel? So by the time they're ready to buy, they do come to you, right? Are there different tools or data sets that you look at when doing keyword research?
It is getting tougher to find good data sources, especially where you're down to a relatively small number of search queries. So if it's a really specific product, the best tool that you can use if you've got a little bit of budget is to run a paid search campaign across a deck of keywords. If you can get that sort of kind of joined up thinking, and ultimately see which exact match keywords are generating sales. That is the best source, because you can put that in the you can get the visibility because you can pay to get it, and you can understand the metrics very, very quickly. There are other tools out there, and there's the keyword tool in Google, and there's some other tools, but generally they're not all going to be taken with a pinch of salt. The best way to get accurate data is to send PPC traffic to your site and then go after that from an organic perspective. That would be my strategy if budget was no option and timescales were no option.
That's an interesting strategy. I know that once people have both campaigns going, SEO and paid search, I've heard them using the data to help each other. But
yeah,
so you're saying if you get a new client on, you recommend maybe for the first couple of weeks they throw money, if they have it, they do money towards paid ads so that you can see what's converting, what's not converting, exact match, phrase match, broad match, all of it.
I think if you're going to spend 50, 60 grand on a website build, and you're going to redevelop an e-commerce site, putting a couple of $1,000s into a PPC campaign to just understand the visibility is a good investment. And it's not like you're throwing that budget away.
Yeah.
You could still be potentially making sales. Even if it doesn't have an ROI, even if you get back what you pay, you've got that data for free effectively.
Yeah. No, I love that. I think that's great. Great advice. Okay, so now you have that keyword research. Now we take that, we do some on-page optimization. What are your recommendations on on-page optimization for e-commerce websites?
If we take a step back and we just look at technical optimization for websites, there are two things you've got to do. The first part is Google needs to come and find your content and be able to crawl it. Mm-hmm. So you've got to build a site that allows a crawler to find content. And then once it finds that content, it has to understand the hierarchy and how it is connected to other pages of content on your site. So really, it can get fairly technical, but things are going to do one of two things. They're either going to allow for content to be found, crawled, and indexed, or it's going to be giving signals that content is of high value. They're the two things that you're looking to do. And everything that is kind of on site is doing one of those two things generally.
So let's dig into those two a little bit more.
Okay, so if you're looking at things like title tags, you would always be putting primary keywords at the beginning of a title tag. If you're going to write meta descriptions, so they're not directly proportional, so they're not directly linked to visibility. But if you write a good meta description that's got lots of schema integration and rich snippet data in there, and you get a high click-through rate, that is going to help. And if you've got relevant content on page, if you've not hidden it within JavaScript and you've not embedded it in images, and all that data can be found, the crawler can understand that you've got 150 words that is relevant to a piece of content. You've maybe got some user-generated content which is giving slightly different opinions. If all of that can be crawled and indexed, that then becomes a really good thing that Google wants to give to its customers, to say, of all the people that are advertising iPhones, we think this is the best source of information on iPhones for you. And it doesn't just it uses lots of different things, but the content is one of the main, and the on-site elements are one of those main ways that it can discover that.
So I have a lot of clients come to me and say, and I think this is agencies in the past have been stuck on a certain amount of keywords, and they've trained customers to say, or maybe not keywords, but word count on a page. They've trained customers to say, should I write 300 words for this page? Should I write 1,000 words for this page? What's your strategy on figuring out about how many words need to go on the page, and how often you should use keywords without overdoing it and keyword stuffing?
Yeah, so we used to work to a length of text, and we used to work on a percentage density of keywords. The system is Google's a lot cleverer than that, because they're quite easy things to spoof. Mm-hmm. If you want to know the best content size, Google the keyword that you're interested in and see what the top competitor's done, because that's the guy that you're trying to beat, and it's then working at which metrics can you improve upon. But yeah, so that's if you wanted an answer that exact, that's how I would go about answering that exact question. How can we outrank the person who's already at position 1? If it's because they've got a massive domain strength, and that's the reason why, okay, well, how do we get our site to be a higher domain strength than that particular site, and is that commercially viable?
I'm so glad you said that. That's actually the advice that I give everybody too. You go,
Nice.
you Google,
Nice.
yeah, you Google the keyword, you look at your
Yeah.
competition, you analyze that, and that's about what you need, right? And that goes for a lot of the on-page stuff. So if we're going top to bottom, we're looking at your URL first, then your title, then your meta, then your H1s, then images, right? Then before we go down a little bit further, let's talk about images. How do you optimize images? How do you make sure and choose the right image that converts well? What's your strategy around that side of things?
Yeah, so images are they're quite an interesting one. A lot's changed. There was a whole load of documents that were leaked from Google. I don't know if you saw
Yeah.
that.
Mm-hmm.
And there was some interesting stuff came out of that. That the content around images was very important to understanding the context of that image. And actually, over the last kind of week or so, there's been a whole load of content rewritten by Google about video best strategy. And what they're kind of recommending in that documentation is having a single video landing page and using all the content around the video to be relevant to the video itself. And it's almost, we always recommend having one keyword per page. And that's kind of the way it's starting to go with, definitely with video and a little bit with imagery as well. So if you want to show up for an image, it's, what is the file name? What is the alt text? How big is it? How quickly does it load? Kind of all that, and then what is the surrounding text to that image as well? All those kind of important elements, not just the picture itself and the alt description, but all of the elements that surround that image, and then making sure it loads quickly. Because generally, if you're into kind of page load speed, most of the time it's because you've got big whacking images.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And I mean, load time is important in SEO for sure. And I'm sure you've had this, like I have with clients, where you get the website and you're like, this is so slow. You go to the database, you export all the images, you compress all the images, you upload the images, and like immediately overnight it fixes a lot of problems. Not all of them, but a lot of problems, right?
It'll get you a long way there. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so then after images, you go down, you have your content. We've talked about content, keywords, and then there's usually like FAQs and reviews. Let's talk about reviews, user-generated content. How important is it to have reviews on product pages for e-commerce websites versus reviews for the overall company, like on Google or these other websites?
Yeah, so there's a couple of reasons why reviews are important. From a creation of content perspective, it's giving lots of people a way to write about that product. So from a pure text point of view, you're getting a lot more words about whatever the product is. So you're becoming a better resource because there's a lot of opinion. Look at how Amazon puts reviews onto pages. A lot of people will go to Amazon to read the reviews and then go off and buy it somewhere else.
Yeah.
The other thing you've got to, going back to Google being a crawler, if it visits your website on day 1 and it indexes your content and it comes back on day 10 and nothing's changed, it goes, well, I'm a computer, I've only got a finite amount of resource, I maybe won't come back for 20 days this time, and it'll come back in 30 days in total, and kind of go, well, nothing's changed again, I'll come back in a month. And if you've got an e-commerce site that has a whole load of new SKUs being added, or maybe seasonality comes in and goes, if you're telling Google that the content doesn't change very often, it won't come back very often, so it won't find the changes as quickly. And you almost end up in this negative loop where Google's not discovering stuff because you're never changing things. The UGC, user-generated content, is a really good way to get content onto a product page, which can be quite hard to write about if you've got 100,000 SKUs. But if you're every time you sell one of those, you can get a review from someone. You're getting a whole load of content written for you. You're sending a whole load of signals to Google that it will come back and go, oh, this page has been out of date for a week. Right, I need to start visiting this site every 3 days. And if it comes back and if it's getting reviews every day, and when it comes to that page, it doesn't just crawl that page, it then disappears off down links and maybe finds other pages of content it hasn't crawled. It just makes your site more appealing to that crawler that Google wants an up-to-date index of your site. If you can constantly be changing it and there not be a huge amount of time investment from your team to do that's the best case scenario of sending signals that your website's updating and Google's out of date to get that crawler to come back to then discover stuff that you want it to discover in the future.
So it's beneficial both for the search engines as well as humans. Do you have any, if I'm a business owner sitting back listening to this and I'm like, that's great, I want to do it, how do I do it? Do you have recommendations on how I get more reviews?
Yeah, so I would always build them into an email post sale. That's the simplest way to do it. It's always worth looking at the way you're going to integrate those reviews once you have them. So there's a number of different platforms, and I would always look at a platform that gives you your seller ratings, which is a Google Ads thing, and collects the reviews. So you could get a review that would be valuable from an SEO perspective just from Google, for example. But if you were to use one of the seller ratings providers, you can not only get your stars in Google Ads, which is only accepted by these seller ratings approved companies, but you can also get that content on your site as well. But there's a couple of little grey areas you just need to be careful of, because a lot of them will put them into an iframed type plugin. And an iframe is basically a window onto another website. So you've got to be a little bit careful sometimes that if you're using something that's embedded, that page is getting that content and you're not effectively creating value for an embedded page on their domain. There are API ways of doing it, and then marking up the API and using schema and all that sort of stuff on top of that raw data coming in. That's the most effective way to do it. If you're just embedding stuff, you maybe aren't going to get the value that you hope for. So yeah, there's some technical elements there, but yeah, a lot of great platforms will allow you to email someone a couple of days after the purchase and just say, you bought widget 1, would love to get a review. You can sometimes lubricate that with a discount to leave a review, and that also then ups your repeat custom, and you then get reviews and value that way. It's a balance depending on what your margins are, what your products are, and yeah.
And those platforms usually have drip campaigns where they can tell you send out an email. If they didn't open it, then 3 days later, send another email. If they opened it but didn't click, 2 days later, send another one. And if they click, you can tell if they come, right? So it's not just, I think a lot of people worry about overwhelming the customers, but a lot of times if you put yourself in their position, like I look at emails and I'm like, oh, I need to get back to that, but I'm busy right now. And then I forget about it. And then, so if you send it, sometimes the next, day or two, I'm not that busy when I see it. And I'm not mad at you for sending it to me. If I'm mad, I'm just going to unsubscribe. And I don't do that very often. So I think business owners need to be a little bit more aggressive in their approach to the email marketing, especially for getting these super valuable things like the user-generated content. You mentioned schema, and schema is very important, which also goes with FAQs, which was the next thing I was going to talk about. Let's dig into schema on the product page. What other elements of schema can go on an e-commerce product page? And why should business owners make sure to make it a priority to have it on there?
Yeah, so schema it's been around a few years now, and it's a way to mark up text effectively. So what you're saying is you might have something that's 4 out of 5, and to a crawler, because remember Google's just crawling, it will look at 4 out of 5, and it may not understand what 4 out of 5 means.
Yeah.
But if you mark it up in ratings review and using the schema for ratings, you can say, well, there are 5 reviews, the average rating is 4, the min rating is 1, the maximum rating is 5. So when Google looks at that markup, it goes, oh, I get what this is. And you can even get it in your rich snippets. So on your search engine result page, where you've got your meta description, you can get price, you can get availability, you can get reviews, all in that element there. So if you've got competitors, and they can see that your product's got a 5 out of 5 and they've not got seller ratings on theirs, that's a potential increase in click-through rate you'll have by getting that schema being there. So if you get a higher percentage of people there, you've now got more traffic and you're in the funnel for sales then.
Yeah, and it's, so correct me if I'm wrong, and there's a few that I might be missing, but you can wrap schema around breadcrumbs. You can wrap it around, authorship, which you probably wouldn't have on a product page. Wrap it around your FAQs. And I saw a cool video the other day, which I'm starting to implement on my site, which you said when you go to Google and you have those rich snippets that show up. If you optimize your FAQs correctly, you'll have your product listing, and then the FAQs will be drop downs right below it, which is pretty awesome. So imagine having your product image show up, your title, your meta, your star rating, and all of those FAQs below. Like if you're in the top 3 and you have that and the top 2 don't have it, people are going to click on yours more often than not.
Yeah, absolutely. Ratings, price, availability, you can get all of that, which is amazing. You know, if you're looking for a product and you and your competitor, yours says in stock and theirs doesn't mention it, you're going to click on the in stock one.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, that's huge. Okay, so a big problem that a lot of e-commerce companies have is duplicate content. How do you address? And the reason is because you have all of your categories, and there's the same products in multiple categories and multiple filters and multiple sortings and stuff. How do you ensure that these e-commerce companies are sending the right signals to Google and other search engines saying, here is my primary content, the rest of this don't penalize me for?
so there's a couple of ways of doing that, and we look at the different types of duplicate content that exist. If we look at kind of one of the first ones you mentioned was duplicate products in an information architecture hierarchy. So you might have a red pair of trainers that's a running shoe and a tennis shoe. So that might sit in two categories. A lot of the big sites struggle with this. And what they tend to do is all of the products will sit in a product directory. So it'll be domain.com/product/tennis shoe 123, for example.
Yeah.
If what I've always tried to implement on small to medium e-commerce sites is a primary category for each product. So if something's a tennis shoe, it would show up under domain name /tennis shoes/product name. And then for everything else, it would exist, but it would have a virtual URL. It wouldn't have, so if you click on it, you would go to the canonical URL, which we'll come on to a second, which would be the single version of that page. That takes a little bit of work. It takes a little bit of management. And for a lot of big e-commerce sites, it's a step too far. So there's a potential there for smaller businesses to group products into their categorization. Because if you look at, any of the big sites at the moment, what they'll do is they'll have a product subfolder and all the products will sit in there. And if you take the wheel and spoke analogy that a lot of SEOs use, where you want to have lots of signals pointing, by having that product in a product folder rather than a tennis shoes folder, that's a potential one less signal that you're sending that this is a tennis shoe rather than just a product. The other type of content that you will get that's duplicated is FAQs on pages. So you might have a standard product template, and then you might have a set of FAQs. You might have the same FAQ on lots of different product pages. So we used to do things like we used to hide that in JavaScript files and pull that in. I think search engines have got a lot better with dealing with that sort of content now. So as long as it's not massive and as long as it's further down the page, I wouldn't worry too much about that. And then the final kind of main type of there's two more really. There's canonical. So canonical is you have the same page exists in 4 or 5 places, and you use what's called a canonical tag to say this is the one that is the unduplicated version, and then on all the duplicates you point to this one version, and that becomes the one that Google crawls and indexes. You normally get that sort of thing if you've maybe got sort options or filter options or color options. You might end up with these multiple variants, and then the other one is if you're running lots of different language-based sites. There's a thing called a relative language tag that you can say, yeah, hands up, this is a duplicate, but this is the French version, and this is the Italian version, and you can just start giving signals to that crawler, which is a machine, to say, no, it's not a duplicate, or it is a duplicate, here's the preferred version, or, the reason that's a duplicate is because that's the French version, and that's kind of, so it's just giving those signals back to the search engine about duplicate.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up the hreflang stuff, because there's so many different. If you start from like your main product page, and then you have the variants, the red, green, blue, orange, all the different variants. Those are some, and you have your canonical saying this is the main one. Here's the other one, but then you have one in French, one in Spanish, one in others, and each of those have their colors. It still has to point back. So you have your canonicals going here, and you have your hreflang saying that's the same thing. We just need you to show it in Canada French instead of, London English, right? So having all of those signals, I think, especially with the enterprise level websites, 50,000 pages and more, it really can help. With your crawl budget, it can help. Google understand which ones to show, which ones not. The last company I worked for, it was an e-commerce website, global e-commerce website, and we did a a transition to a different type of URL. We redid the front end and we changed the URL, and we didn't do the canonicals right in the beginning and the hreflang in the beginning. And what ended up happening is we had our English website from America showing up in Japan, and we had our London office showing up in America, and those aren't really helpful, right? Because like if you're in America and you go to the London website and try to buy it, it's like it's gonna be a bad experience. It's gonna stop you, and you're not paying in dollars. They don't ship from London to America, so really important to make sure that all of that gets taken care of and structured properly.
And it's one of those things to try and do from launch, because we kind of spoke about earlier, when the crawler comes to the site, if it realizes that page is out of date, it will throw loads more resource at the site to fix it. So when you launch a new site with, like you said, a new URL format, if it comes to a page, you'll see a sudden huge amount of requests as it realizes the whole site is out of date. If you've not got something like canonical tags in, you'll have a spike of requests. It will drop off again. You then fix your canonical tag. Well, you've had the big wave of indexation now, and you might miss, so it's then slower to get things to turn round.
What about internal linking? And let me be a little more specific. So I think I want to hear your strategy on how to do proper internal linking to help with SEO. But also there is a level of too much internal linking. If you're sending people to a product page, you want them to add to cart and check out. If you have too many distractions sending them to other pages, especially to the higher funnel pages like blog posts, you're getting them further away from conversion. So talk to me about your strategy on internal linking and how to do it properly to help SEO without hurting the sale.
So the way I've always looked at internal linking, and it's maybe a little bit out of date now, but I think it still works, is back in the day, if you ever Googled click here, and I've not done it in a while, you used to always get the Adobe website, because everyone would have a PDF and they would say, well, if you want to download PDF Reader, click here. So Google thought, well, click here must be super relevant for Adobe PDFs, because that's what everyone's linking to. And actually in those files that were obtained from Google, they still talk about anchor text being a very important metric. So the way I would look at it is you've got blog posts and that top of funnel content pointing to category pages or to product pages. I maybe wouldn't link back up the other way. So I would have a wheel and spoke, which is lots of content pointing to a product page, lots of blog pages pointing to the category pages, which are pointing to the product pages. So everything's kind of pointing in, and that funnel is starting very wide at the top and then condensing. And back in the day when we used to do page rank sculpting and all that sort of stuff, which you don't need to do anymore, that's kind of the manual way we used to kind of make that happen, is to sculpt page rank to flow down. You don't need to do that anymore, but I would be producing links that go in that direction. Exactly as you said, I wouldn't have a tennis shoe page and then a link to the blog that says view our tennis shoe guide on the best women's tennis shoes. I would never go that way, because like you said, once they're on that product page, ideally you want them to buy that. That's the main goal. It's the KPIs of those pages as well. When you're at a product page, the KPIs are by the product. When you're on a blog, the KPIs are maybe dwell time, pages viewed, time on site. The metrics, the SEO metrics change depending on the page type that you're on.
Okay. So most e-commerce websites that I've analyzed, the highest traffic page is the home page. The second highest traffic are product pages, and the third are category pages. How do we properly optimize category pages to be effective in e-commerce SEO?
So that comes down to the information architecture of the site. So you've got domain, and you've then got your folder structure of how you're going to have these categories. And it becomes a bit of a, again, I would look at what your competitors are doing. Do they have a really deep hierarchy, which is, it's become super, super granular because people are looking for a very granular type of term. It's maybe quite a long search query they're using, or is it the opposite? And it kind of depends on the keyword. I hate being that SEO that says it depends, but generally Category optimization comes from having a good information architecture that's got well-researched keywords, that's got good content on. Nothing is really done that differently, but it's just making sure that those elements, that you've got a URL that's understandable, that it's a single category for a single product, so you're not having multiple keywords on category pages, and then aligning that to something where you've actually kind of got the chance with your domain authority to rank. If you're a brand new website and you want to show up for credit cards, whereas if your kind of key market is widgets, marine widgets, and there's not a huge amount of competition, but it's a very exact, that's when you could go very granular, and it's that balance of where you sit in the market.
Another interesting challenge that e-commerce websites have, and you brought this up a little bit earlier, is holiday products. So if you only have holiday products and holiday categories around the holidays, what do you do with those links and those pages throughout the rest of the year? Without you don't want a 301 redirect because it's a permanent redirect. Do you keep them up? Do you 302 them? What is your strategy to making sure that the holidays come back every single year organically?
Yeah, so if it was purely SEO that they were interested in, the pages would stay there, the products would stay there, the categorization would stay there, because what you don't want to be doing is removing content out of Google's index and then saying, right, now come and find it again and re-indexes. If you can keep those pages live as still as possible, so not change too much on them, and then on the time leading up to that seasonal event, that's when you start producing that top of funnel content, so maybe the blog posts, inbound links, that sort of stuff, to increase the visibility of a page that's already got at least 12 months worth of history behind it. Ideally keep everything live, don't 301 redirect stuff. It's kind of the same as when a product goes out of stock. If it's going to come back in fairly quickly, keep the page there, just say currently out of stock, don't delete that page off the site. That's something I've seen done quite a lot. A product will get a massive amount of sales because the visibility is good, it'll run out of stock, so they'll take the product down. They'll then get the stock back in a month later, put the page back up again, and it takes 3 or 4 weeks for that visibility to come back and sales to start again. You kind of don't want to be 2 or 3 weeks late after the Christmas rush, for example, because it's a seasonal peak. If you miss that peak, it's another 12 months till the next peak again. So ideally, if you search for Christmas trees or whatever it is on your site and you're there, keep it there in February, March, April, because people might not be buying them, but when it comes back round again, you're in that position.
So if we only as a company, we only sell those products during Black Friday, and it's a one-time offer until next year, and after Cyber Monday it's gone, do I just keep an out of stock page going? Do I say coming back next year? How do I deal with the categories and the product pages?
So I would keep it the same. Don't change any of it, but on the individual pages, should someone be looking for a Christmas tree in July and they happen to find your page, I would say that it's out of stock, collect an email address and say we'll let you know when the stock comes back into date. So there still can be some value by collecting data at that stage, but I wouldn't be taking those pages down. There might be other business cases for it, maybe your range is changing, maybe it won't be exactly the same products next year. That's where you kind of maybe have to flex a bit. But if it's going to be the exact same stuff, keep it. Maybe make the links less prominent on the home page because that has value it can pass, and then a few months before your peak, you need to start getting it back on the home page, producing content.
I like the idea of collecting an email saying we'll let you know when we're back in stock, if you still have that up, for sure. How do you go about doing link building, external link building for e-commerce websites?
It's an extension of the the traditional link building tactics that you would use. You can use things like Ahref to understand the inbound links for your competitors. You can look out for broken links. You can look out for opportunities that exist. It tends to be a lot of affiliate stuff at the product level will link, if they're going to allow that link juice to flow or not. But link building for organic e-commerce sites is tough generally. if it's a specific product, you need to be looking at where are those customers researching. Are there category type websites that would allow you to talk? Yeah, I mean, e-commerce link building is one of the tougher things to look at, and yeah, link building generally is quite challenging at the moment. It's one of the more challenging things because people have kind of seen the value of it, and it's quite a kind of a guarded process now. So yeah, it's a tough one, link building for e-commerce, definitely. And it's a lot of people, that's what a lot of agencies just used to do because it was relatively easy to monetize. There was lots of fairly shady things going on with these link builders and link exchanges, and it's hard to find a process that adds value for very generic stuff. The way to start it is go to the person that's ranked at position 1, use the free demo of Ahref, look at all of their inbound links and find out if you can replicate that. If it's particular forums, that would be where I would start. Look at the high page rank links that they're getting and come up with a strategy and kind of look at how your competitors have done that.
Yeah. It is one of the more difficult things to do correctly in SEO, right? Like it's big risk. There's big risk and big reward. If you do it right, it's a huge reward for your website. It's great for SEO, but you can do it wrong. You can trigger Google if you haven't been getting links and it looks flat, and then all of a sudden you get like 400 in a week, and then it goes flat, and then 3. Like Google sees that. And they'll penalize you for that, right?
And yeah, if you're doing something that it's not against Google's terms of service, but if you're conning the algorithm, the risk is they'll do an update because they found 1,000 other people that do it. And I heard stories of call centers of hundreds of people in a call center. There was a Google update, and the next day their call center is dead because they've lost the visibility. So if you're gonna do something like that, just be careful. Leave that generally to the affiliate guys that can have burner websites and that sort of stuff. But yeah. if it was a big company, I wouldn't be touching that side of things. I'd be producing relevant, interesting content and letting things grow naturally, because that's what Google's looking for. And if you're playing that game, they've got some very clever people.
How do you measure success primarily from e-commerce? Like I know that the end result is money. But when you're doing SEO, how do you know, hey, we're getting closer to that revenue that we want?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of depending on the page. On the simple answer is depending on the type of page. So product pages, visibility and revenue. Category pages is kind of a half house, and then blog and content pages is about time on site, dwell time, and kind of reach, and it's aligning that to a funnel. But in terms of actually getting accurate data out, it's getting tougher. So GA4 will give you information, and the way that Google Analytics 4 will give you data, it can. Well, I mean, GA4 is they're producing an update at the moment. So we've got enhanced attribution in Google Ads, which basically means it will take lots of signals and kind of guess if you did what it expected or not. So it gets around people using cookie blockers. It can still get that sort of data. That's being rolled out now into GA4. So it's not counting the actual number of conversions. It's using a model to say, well, if 10% within this cohort, 10% achieve it. So we kind of assume that's happening to everyone. And you get this kind of modeled stuff. So it is getting harder to accurately show that journey. The nice value of the top of funnel stuff, which is a metric that not a lot of people use, it's something we've been testing with Google Ads. So if we go back to that funnel analogy where you've got the product at the bottom, you've got the category page, and you've got the research topics at the top, their ideal page is to be tagging with Google Ads scripts and then using that as audience data. So the way Performance Max and all the way the Google paid stuff's going is more about audiences and less about keywords. So if you can have a page that's got 1,000 people a month doing research on, and you go, well, these are the sorts of people that are interested in our product, that can be a specific audience. You then using Google Ads to kind of force people through the funnel with paid media. And that's an interesting way of kind of going, well, the bottom of the funnel might be dominated with lots of competition, lots of PPC ads. The top of the funnel might not be as much. Let's build audiences there and then run paid search or even paid social to people that have engaged with that research content with content that would allow them to push them down further into the funnel. And that works really well. If you can get a really nice research page and you can start producing thousands of users and tag them, so it's kind of like a remarketing campaign. An audience source, which is a nice way for SEO and PPC to hold hands and basically cuddle a little bit rather than fight and battle.
Too often they're separate, right? Too often they do their own thing. They don't care about the data from each other. What would you say are the top 3 most common mistakes that e-commerce companies make when it comes to SEO?
God, that's a great question. Most common mistakes I tend to find are page load speeds. So they've produced something, they've gone out and got nice images and they've not updated them to the latest image file types, or they've just put them in as big files. And if you've got a page that loads slowly and the exact same page your competitor's got loads quickly, it's going to prefer that page because it just gives their user a better experience. Next thing I would look at is probably information architecture, and have they aligned their information architecture, their URL structure, to commercially important keywords. And then the other thing I'd probably stay on URLs, and I would look at parameters on URLs. I've seen quite a few issues that a lot of e-commerce companies went through a stage of powering their navigation using the URL, and they used to put loads of parameters into the URL to help build navigation elements, but it just ended up with thousands of duplicate pages, and even things like people put calendars onto pages, and each day or month or year is a new page with a new URL, so you end up with this infinite number of pages on your site. And if it's maybe a little bit of a simplification, but if you only had 10 pages of crawl credit that Google was going to come and use on your site that day, and it spent all of that crawling 10 duplicate pages, that's it, you've used it. If you can give it just the canonical stuff, that's a much more efficient way. So I would say duplicate pages caused by parameters and URLs. I would say URL not being aligned to search keywords, and I can't remember what the first one I said was now.
You said page speed, and then the architecture,
page speed,
and then the URL.
That was it. Yeah. I'm glad you were listening.
No, all great things, all great advice. Martin, if I'm a business owner out there listening to this, first of all, thank you. I've loved everything that you've talked about. I've learned a lot. If I'm a business owner, is there anything else, any other advice you have for me to help elevate myself online with my e-commerce website?
Yeah, I think it's getting the mindset right. So the Google made a PDF of how to do SEO that's maybe 15, 20 years old now. Read that document, and if you're doing something that is breaking the ethos of that document, that's when you're in dodgy territory. That hasn't really changed with AI, with everything that exists now. It's still that original document. It's a PDF, and if you Google it, you'll find it. That's the core of kind of what you're doing, and you'll never beat Google. Yeah, you might beat them for a while, but you'll get busted eventually. As people are seeing with AI now and generated content on pages. There's a big core release last week, and a lot of that is looking at people that are producing thousands of pages around every tiny nuance different keyword, and Google's been doing this game for a long time. It can pick that stuff up pretty quickly and go, well, you're not actually adding any value to our customers, so we'll just get rid of you. And they've done that before as well. They're pretty brutal.
Speaking of AI in the future, are there any other things that you predict are going to happen in the future that as a business owner, we can make sure and go from where we're at to where the future is without being left behind?
That's a really interesting one, and I think Google are a little bit panicked by AI at the moment, and we've seen their deployment of their AI snippets that first launched in the US a couple of months ago and now over in the UK, and they just need to keep people on the platform. If people start, a lot of e-commerce stuff maybe went to Amazon, and then that's we saw the Merchant Center come out. We even get free shopping ads still as a way to kind of pull people back. We've now had people. I don't think the vast majority of people are using ChatGPT and are using it as much as we expect, but it would just take, as soon as those early adopters, which are us in our kind of fields of what we do, when that becomes more mature, if the vast population is starting to use ChatGPT to ask questions rather than Google to ask questions, you've kind of lost that person. And kind of ranking on ChatGPT is not something that people have really found the strategy to do yet. It's interesting. So I think it's panicking Google. I think Microsoft might have quite a good advantage of this. So it might be worth making sure that your Microsoft Search Console is up to date and deployed, because it's got some interesting stuff coming. I think it does need a bit of a shake-up. I think Google has got a big monopoly, and we might be on the cusp of something big changing.
Yeah, Google has owned the market for so many years, and it's Google and it's YouTube, which they also own. I think what's crazy, people think that AI is going to be number 3. I think it's actually TikTok. The younger generation, there's data showing that they go to TikTok and do searches to find their how-tos, to find the products they want, now that TikTok Shop is there and growing globally as well. And then the other consideration that people need to be aware of is ChatGPT is great, and GPT search is going to be fun to play around with. But the way that the LLMs work, like, it's just taking the information that it already knows, compiling it the best that it can, and giving you an answer, which is maybe not always the best, right? There's hallucinations, there's incorrect information. So it still might be a little
I think
while.
It's going to force Google to become more transactional. And it's going to have it's got the audience data from YouTube, which is an amazing platform for audiences. But I've seen Google search degrade over the last couple of years. I don't feel I get the best results from Google anymore. When you kind of used to ask it a question, you'd be like, oh, how did it know that? I don't know, I've noticed a degrade in its quality. So I think they're going to have to pull their fingers out. I think AI will mature and will become it's interesting. I do like TikTok, incredibly addictive, and it's almost it's an entertainment platform, TikTok now, and in the same way that people of our generation would maybe YouTube, how to repair this bit of my car, it's TikTok is the channel for that particular demographic. So that's interesting. And I like when new products come in and things change, because you can knock the top guys off when there's a period of change happening.
It's leveling out, and it's still not quite there, but I don't know if you know this, but Google just had a lawsuit happen where they're no longer allowed to be the default browser on iPhones or any other like Android phones that aren't Google phones. So that's going to hurt them a little bit. The TikTok is hurting them a little bit. GPT is hurting them a little bit. An interesting thought on TikTok, they are evolving in ways that I think people don't realize. There is a STEM, STEM. So there's like the science, math,
technology, engineering,
technology. Right. So there is a feature, if it's not automatically showing up on your TikTok, you can go into the settings and turn it on. And so then right now I have STEM, following, shop, and for you. So when my kids are like, hey, let's watch TikTok, I put it on the STEM one, and it's all educational for them, right? It's not kids dancing and stuff, like it's educational. The other thing to consider with TikTok is that you can upload the horizontal videos and turn it sideways now. And so I think they're probably going to start competing with YouTube and all that as well. What will be interesting is to see by the end of this year what happens in America with TikTok, because I believe the government has said it's going to be shut down unless it's bought.
Unless it's bought and managed from America. That's interesting. I mean, you kind of think a few years back, Google did have a social network, didn't it? They started to build a social platform. It's good. It's interesting when everything's changing.
Well, Martin, I really appreciate you taking the time again to jump on and enlighten us about e-commerce SEO. I can tell you've been doing it for a long time. I can tell you're passionate about it. And I, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for jumping on and sharing all of your knowledge with us.
Thank you for having me, matey. It's been great. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And to everyone else who's listening out there, we'll talk to you guys next week. Thanks so much for listening to the episode today. Listen, I know how valuable an hour of your time can be, and for you to take that busy time out of your day and spend it with us, it really means a lot. If you enjoyed today's episode, please consider liking and subscribing on whatever platform you're on. And don't forget to leave a comment. Tell us what you thought about the interview. Ask us questions. Let us know what other digital topics you'd like to hear about in the future. We're here to add value to your life and elevate your digital presence online. If you'd like some help doing that, reach out to me at fireusmarketing.com. See you on the next one.